Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to build a dispersed team. I'm Corinne Jones from OD Consulting in Brisbane, Australia, and leading virtual teams. And for those who haven't done my webinars before, I specialise in working with senior managers, team leaders, team members, in helping them to significantly increase the productivity and performance of their dispersed teams. Now, if you are a member of a dispersed team, you'll know how hard it is, how challenging it is to build a team across distance. Are you a team or just a bunch of individuals getting on with their own thing? So today I'm sharing tips from Ted's Tech team, as well as some of my clients who are really successful in building a team across geographic locations. Now, please feel free to ask questions as we go. You will see that there is the question area down in the right-hand corner. I will either deal with them at the time or I'll come back to them at the end. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to start by looking at the current reality for dispersed teams. We'll look at some very recent research. We're then going to share lessons from successful teams. As I mentioned, the tech team behind TED Talks, and a consulting team and a finance team that I've been working with who are doing it really well. And then we'll look at how you can apply those lessons to your team. So let's look at the current reality. At the moment, around 1.3 billion people globally are working remotely at least some of the time. The challenge is that only about 50% of dispersed teams are achieving their objectives. And according to some global research undertaken during 2016, the major challenges are leadership that's appropriate for dispersed teams, the lack of face-to-face contact making it much harder to build the team, ineffective collaboration practices, and the isolation of remote team members. And many of you today might fully relate to a number of those challenges. So let's look at Ted's Tech team. They are dispersed across about 3 countries and 7 US states, and they're made up of 29 members. And as you know, if you've watched any of the TED Talks, they are a high-performing team. They bring, together fantastic opportunities for us to learn. So here are their tips for remote collaboration. Get together in person when possible. Now, I know it's not possible for all of you, but if you can, it makes a really big difference in terms of team building. Set expectations so everybody knows exactly what's expected of them on a day-to-day basis. Have a standing meeting, and that means a regular meeting, just short, sweet update for everybody so everybody knows what's happening with all elements of the team. So they feel as though they're a part of the team rather than individuals working out there on their own. Review your tools. Make sure you're using the right tools for virtual collaboration and the right tools for the right types of communication. Invest in video conferencing, and I'll come back to the why on that as we go through the webinar. Replicate the elements of the normal office wherever you can, and I'll provide a number of ideas on doing that. They also ensure everyone gets a hotspot. So make sure everybody can work from anywhere, wherever they happen to be working from home, working from a remote hub, working from a coffee shop, so that they can get online really quite easily. And get a room for everyone. And what they mean by this is to make sure that everybody has a space where they can privately, without interruption, have remote meetings, online meetings with their remote colleagues. So to add to these tips, I'd like to share with you some of the tips from some of the success stories among my clients. Little bit of a common theme here, create a shared sense of purpose. Develop a team charter and regularly revisit it. Set expectations. Again, we're back to the clarity of expectations. replicate the elements of the normal office. And for these teams, they do that with photos, with charters on the wall, with team building activities, with virtual coffee meetings, a range of things that you would normally do in the face-to-face office. They use video conferencing and share screens whenever they possibly can. They do have a standing meeting, and they make sure that that's a video meeting. And again, I'll come back to the reasons for impressing on you the importance of the video meeting. And they use email only when necessary. If you have been involved in email trails between yourself and remote team members, you'll know that breakdowns in communication can occur. It can take a very long time to actually get the message across. So try to use, whether it's instant messaging, chat, video, telephone, wherever you can, instead of the email. So now I'd like to show you some ideas for applying each of these tips, both the tips from Ted's Tech team and the tips from these teams to your team, so that you can work to build a real sense of team. Now, the first thing that came from Ted was to meet face-to-face if at all possible, and to use that time to develop shared vision, values, plans, and include some social interaction. If you are face-to-face, you'll find that that really speeds up the team building and trust building process. Now, if you can't, and I know that a lot of you can't actually meet physically face-to-face, so I would suggest that you still do it, but do it virtually via online video meeting. You can still do a lot of the same things via a video meeting, and perhaps rather than one long, day meeting, break it down into some shorter ones so it's easier for people to stay engaged and online. Now, in terms of creating a sense of shared purpose, here's a process that I've used with a number of dispersed teams to develop a shared sense of vision. So you start by asking your team members what they feel is the purpose of the team, the value that you add as a team, what's unique about your team, and how you want to be perceived. If you ask each individual team member to jot down some responses to those questions, then compare what you've all come up with, bring it all together. I often use a mind mapping process to bring out all of the key elements from all of those responses, and then use that to build a shared team vision. I've found that that has been really powerful with a number of the teams that I've worked with, for building a really strong sense of team. So people feel that they're a part of something bigger than them, as opposed to just working individually in a remote location. So that's the shared sense of purpose. Now, you will have remembered that the tips from my successful client teams suggested development of a team charter. Now, a lot of teams, whether they be face-to-face or dispersed, often have a set of values. And I've put some examples up on the screen here. So, we value leadership, responsibility, respect, teamwork, creativity, all really important elements of a team. The drawback here, and particularly if you have team members from a range of cultural backgrounds, these words are very open to interpretation. And so I suggest that if you're developing a team charter, and the client team that I mentioned earlier definitely did this, take it further, take the conversation further to really tease out and identify what are the behaviours that you're looking for. So leadership might be proactively reach out to clients and customers. Responsibility might be say what you think, particularly if you have a different perspective. Respect might be acknowledge electronic communication within agreed timeframes. Teamwork might be connect with other team members regularly. Creativity might be challenge the status quo by asking what if questions. So I suggest that you work to identify what are the behaviours that we really value as a team. Now, that's just the first step in having a team charter that's going to work for you. The next is to make sure that you get every single team member's commitment to operating within that charter. So you would need to get everybody's input, draft something, circulate it around, get everybody's okay, get everybody to individually commit, and then use it regularly. A number of teams that I work with will bring it up on their welcome screen at the beginning of a video conference to remind people that this is how we're working. But the other part of it is to ask people to call behaviour respectfully if they feel that others are operating outside the team charter. But it is a great way of bringing people together and helping people to work together much more. Now, each of the examples I provided identified the importance of clarifying expectations. And to use a model that's developed by Entente here to explain what I mean, and this is actually a model that I use with a lot of the teams that I work with. Now, just to pull this apart a little bit, we all have a set of needs and expectations that we take to work with us every day, even if that's down to the office downstairs. We, there are things we need from our team leader, our team members, the organisation, the work itself. Some of these are quite foundation, so it might simply be we need money to put food on the table. We need to feel a sense of belonging. We need some job security. Our expectations can vary widely. For some, it might be we expect that work will be fun. It might be we expect that we will have interaction with our team leader and remote team members every single day. It might be that work is just a means to an end, so I expect that I'll get lots of holidays. So we all have very different needs and expectations. And if those are not met, trust is broken. If it's developed at all in the first place, and people become quite demotivated and disengaged from the team. But how often do we actually let people know what we need and expect from them? And how often do we ask others what they need and expect from us? So I suggest a very simple conversation with your remote colleagues so that you can each ask the other what do they need and expect from you, and you can let them know. And so then you've got a really strong foundation there to build trust, which helps to build the team. And trust is very, very fragile, as you would know. So we do need to be very explicit there. Now, each of the example teams also suggested that we have a standing meeting. And I would suggest that you do that via video. So a regular meeting where everyone's involved, everybody has the opportunity to provide an update on projects, but also if you use video, everybody can see each other, but also you can see the nonverbal communication, which is really important for relationship building. Review your tools. I would like to give you, first of all, a little bit of background around the communication tools that you can use when you are operating within a dispersed team. They come in varying levels of richness. So low richness tools are things like policy documents, guidelines, procedures, and email. So they contain the words only, and they tend to be asynchronous. So we're not communicating in real time. We're communicating in an asynchronous way. And I would suggest these tools are only really appropriate for information sharing and updates for the team. If we look at moderate richness tools, you'll see we've got teleconference and telephone there, so we're starting to bring voice in. They're also synchronous because it's happening at the same time. And the other three tools there are not including voice, but they are synchronous. So I would suggest whenever you need any interaction at all, and whenever you're needing to communicate something other than what is very simple information, I would suggest you go for at least moderate richness tools. And then we've got our high richness tools, and these are the ones that again are synchronous but also include those really important non-verbal elements of our communication. So video conference and face-to-face. And I would suggest whenever there is any complexity to your communication, whenever it's sensitive at all, for example, feedback or any tension in the team, I would suggest you go with high richness tools. And so with the tools you use in the team, if you're wanting to build a really strong sense of team, I suggest that you look at all the tools you have available and as a team agree on which tools you're going to use for what. A team I worked with just recently spent some time doing this a few months ago and have found that it has really enhanced, one, their communication within the team, but two, the feeling of the sense of team across the team. I also wanted to share with you some recent research in terms of what the high-performing dispersed teams are using in terms of communication tools. So interesting to see that 84% use instant messaging every day, and a lot are replacing internal email with instant messaging. I know of teams who have totally got rid of any internal emails and are finding that communication breakdowns are reducing and they're much more efficient in their communication. 51% conduct daily phone calls with team members, remote team members. 70% use project management software so they can all see where projects are up to and who's doing what on a regular basis. 76 use team collaboration software again, so they can see what people are working on, who's working on what, they can work on documents together, etc. And when visual non-verbal communication is important, 50% are screen sharing regularly, 39% are using video calls regularly, and only 16% of a recent study identified that they rarely or never use video. So as you can see, a lot of the high-performing teams are using instant messaging and they're using video as much as they can. And screen sharing, very, very popular. So some food for thought in terms of the tools that you're using, the way you're communicating, and the impact that's having on building your team. In terms of replicating the face-to-face, there are a few suggestions that I wanted to provide you with today. The first is to have the meetings or celebrations or morning teas or lunches that you would normally have in a face-to-face office, have them virtually. So you can see this is a real dispersed team who are having a virtual meeting. Their colleagues are up on the screens up there, and in each location, they've all brought along some food to share. So you could do this over coffee meetings. And look, some of these team members are co-located. I know a lot of teams who do this where absolutely no one is co-located. So think about, replicating some of the rituals and celebrations you would normally have in a face-to-face team. It goes a long way to building a sense of team. I also suggest you do some team building. So build some team building games into your regular team meetings. Some of the ideas that I know work quite well in a dispersed team are, the first one might be a caricature match game. So each person would create a caricature or a little comic of themselves. You would put all of those into a shared document and people need to guess who is who. By doing that, you get to know a little bit more about each other, and it's a sense of fun, which also builds the sense of team. The next one is a different take on that one. If you don't feel too artistic or your team members don't feel too artistic, just use images from the internet. So the way you might do this one though would be for people to actually put up an image that they feel says something about them, and they use the opportunity to provide team members with a little bit of their background, helping them to understand that person that little bit better. And the more you understand your remote team members, the more you are building that sense of team, and the more you will be able to feel that you can rely on that particular team member. And the third suggestion is to create avatars, which is a little bit of a different take on the caricatures. You can take something from the internet, you can create something yourself. One particular team that I worked with who were dispersed globally, each created an avatar, and then when they came together in a face-to-face meeting one time, they went through a process of attaching their avatars to their particular location. And as they did that, they told everyone a little bit about their role, their background, their location, what all that means to them. And they found that that built a really strong sense of team. They call it a sense of family, appropriate perhaps to them, not to all teams, but it did really strengthen the team. So just some examples of things that you can do at the beginning or during your team meetings to help to build that sense of team. Again, replicating those things that we do in face-to-face meetings. Something I'd like to share with you now is a tool that I found to be really useful in speeding up the team building process for dispersed or virtual teams. It's called the Prelude Suite, and it is designed specifically for dispersed teams. It's made up of 3 steps. The first step is team tune-up, where individual team members will complete a self-assessment and receive a report of their work preferences. They will then share what they call their I-STAR story. So it's their story of their self-assessment. You will then be able to create a table that shows all of the different styles from all of the team members. So you can see the diversity that you've got across the team, and people complete a STAR Smart journal. Now, this I-STAR is based on the elements of air, water, earth, and fire. And each of those elements has assigned to it particular preferences around the way people work in the team. And then, as you can see on the screen there, there's a 5-point star. And that top north pointing apex of the star represents our quintessence. And this is really what we bring to the team in terms of excellence, the combination of all of our preferences plus our imagination. So people would share all of that. Now, step 2 is around team practice. Team members would then create a visual representation of their I-STAR, and that's called an I-tag. And they will then present that to the team, again, to help the rest of the team members really understand each team member and how they prefer to work. The team members then work together to build their individual I-tags into what we call a we tag, which is a visual representation of excellence for the entire team. And that's a powerful process in terms of bringing the team together. And then step 3 is the bridge to teamwork, which is development of a team alignment plan, which identifies the team's goals and deliverables and matches specific actions and deliverables against the various preferences that you have across the team. So you're actually matching people's strengths to actions and activities, and then there's also the bridge to a team charter. So as you can see, it's a very robust process, but also really quite a speedy process where the entire process can happen over online meetings totaling up to about 3 or 4 hours. So if you'd like to know more about that, please feel free to contact me, and I have my contact details in the final slide. Now, another great way to build relationships across the team and to build the team as a whole is to replicate your water cooler conversations. In face-to-face teams, this is where trust is built, where relationships are built, often where ideas are generated at the water cooler, in the hallway, or in the kitchen. We don't have those opportunities in a dispersed team, so we can replicate them. The reason I have a coffee shop in this image is that I know of managers of dispersed teams who have virtual coffee meetings with their team members. They each head down to their local coffee shop, order their favourite coffee, pick up the phone and have a meeting. Might feel a little bit unusual at first, but they say it goes a long way to building relationships and trust within the team. Other teams use instant messaging or chat. I actually use a chat application throughout the day to stay connected to my dispersed team members. You might like to use just purely informal phone calls from time to time. Those conversations that we have in face-to-face teams around, how's the week going? What have you been up to? What have you got on for the weekend? And finally, you might like to use social media. I know teams who use closed Facebook groups and even use Snapchat to keep up to date with each other throughout the working day, working week. Now, I've talked a few times about the importance of video meetings. I'm going to share with you some research that really backs up my suggestion here. This looks at what people are doing within a conference call. As you can see, a large number are doing other work, sending emails, a lot are eating or making food. About half are going to the restroom or texting or checking social media. And some are even playing video games, online shopping, exercising, and taking phone calls. And if you have been involved in a number of teleconferences, and I have as well, having worked remotely for the last 15 years, you know that it is actually really quite hard to stay engaged, but it's also really hard to define the full context of the information that's being shared within the meeting. So I would suggest you use video as much as you possibly can. And so therefore invest in video conferencing. And the reason I put that in inverted commas is the investment doesn't have to be much at all. It can be either free or very low cost tools that you use. And, you know, these are just a couple. I have no particular affiliation with each of these. There are many more out there as well. So I suggest that you do find the opportunity to do the video meetings as much as you possibly can. So that brings me to the end of the tips and the way in which you might be able to implement those tips within your team. So in summary, I suggest that if at all possible, you get together in person. If not, replicate that with online meetings. Create a shared sense of purpose. So create a shared team vision. Develop a team charter and revisit it regularly. Really clarify expectations. Set expectations between individual team members and between team members and team leader. Replicate the elements of the normal office, whether that be through morning teas, through some team building, through replicating water cooler conversations, whatever you can do to replicate that. Have a standing meeting, so meet often. I find that online meetings are much better if they're short and sharp, so keep them short and sharp. Invest in video conferencing. Share your screens as much as you can. As we saw, those high-performing dispersed teams do a lot of video and screen sharing. And use email only when necessary. I've actually found that it erodes communication rather than building it within a dispersed team. So if you feel you are having challenges in building a sense of team across your virtual team or dispersed team, get in touch. I'm more than happy to spend an hour with you working out a team development strategy. And that brings me to the end of the content. So questions, what questions do we have? We've got a couple here. What's the theory behind the need for face-to-face? Back in the 60s and 70s, a researcher by the name of Albert Mehrabian looked at interpersonal communication and looked at the elements of the words, the tone of voice, and the face-to-face. And while he tended to look at communication under stress, so this doesn't necessarily relate across the board, but not the exact numbers, but the proportions definitely do, what he found was that words only make up 7% of the communication process. The tone of voice makes up 38%, and the non-verbals make up 55%. So it helps us to see why we have so many communication breakdowns if we're just using video or text. And it's a strong piece of evidence in terms of the need for the non-verbals. And another question here, is a strong sense of team possible with no face-to-face at all? Absolutely. I work with teams who've never actually met face-to-face, but by using the virtual opportunities to come together face-to-face, they still can build a strong sense of team. So thank you all very much for being on the webinar today. If you would like more information, I've got a range of blog posts. You can sign up for my newsletter. I've got a number of other recorded webinars. If you go to www.leadingvirtualteams.com.au, and please feel free to connect with me on social media. Good luck with building your dispersed team, and thank you for being with me today.